Welcome to the weekly Torah Power-up in less than 10 minutes, based on the wisdom and teachings of the Rebbe, brought to you by Chabad of Nebraska. Throughout the year, when the Holy Temple stood in Jerusalem, there were two of them. They stood about 70 years apart. One lasted for about 410 years. The other one lasted for about 420 years. And through that time, there were sacrifices brought daily, as well as other sacrifices brought for other times, special occasions, and by individuals when necessary. And each sacrifice had to come with something extra. God always wanted fries with that. And for God, his extras were a specific meal offering and a wine offering. Obviously, God likes the good stuff. So we had to bring wine along with the sacrifice, whether it was a public, a communal sacrifice, or it was an individual sacrifice, a private sacrifice. However, once a year, there was something changed in the system. That it wasn't just wine that was brought along with the sacrifices. There was a special pouring or a special libation that was of water, strictly of water. And there was a lot of pomp and circumstance that came along with this water libation or this water offering. They would go to a special well that was built in the temple, and they would have music and dancing, and the Kohen would go down and get some of the water, and then he would bring it back up, and then he would pour it on the altar in a special spot that they had set up for this libation, and it would drain into a special drain. And you can read much more about it or speak to your rabbi and find out more about it, but it was all celebrated with great joy, music, dancing, and it went on for hours, all the joy and the dancing. It was a great spectacle. Some of the rabbis did things that they were specifically mentioned in the Talmud about the things that they would do, all the call them weird or special stunts and performances that they would do to bring joy to the crowd. It was a crazy, joyous occasion. Now, it's interesting that this ritual is actually not explicitly mentioned in the Torah. It is studied, it was extrapolated by the rabbis based on words or extraneous letters that are written in the Torah, that they understood that there's supposed to be a water libation specifically on the holiday of Sukkot. Once a year, or not really once a year, throughout the holiday of Sukkot, they would pour the water libation, and this only happened during the holiday of Sukkot. The rest of the year, all it was wine. Now, in the Talmud, it relates that anybody who did not see the water libation ceremony, the water pouring ceremony, never saw true joy in their lives. Now, this statement of the Talmud is very, very strange. It's very, very difficult to understand, specifically because the Talmud does generally not point out inequities within people that they cannot fix. If someone has something wrong with them and they have something they can do about it, the Talmud will point it out or mention it and say, this is how you can fix it. But if there's something that we can't do anything about, for us now, the Talmud won't mention it. Now, we are currently living in a time where there is no holy temple. There is no temple for us to experience the water libation, the water offering ceremony. So how could the Talmud point out that we have never really experienced true joy? We've never experienced true happiness because we've never experienced this occasion, this ceremony. Why would the Talmud point out in inequity a problem that we cannot fix? We cannot experience this water libation ceremony. We cannot experience it because this temple does not exist today. Eventually, please God, in the very near future, the third temple will be rebuilt and we'll be able to experience it once again. But as of right now, the Talmud is basically pointing out to us that we cannot experience true joy. That seems very troublesome and very problematic for the Talmud to do that. So let's take a moment and look at the ceremony of the water libation. And what was so special about this water that it brought on such joy? And the real answer, there's several reasons why they would, that are brought down, why they would pour the water. But to focus on it for a moment is what was so special about the water. And if you take a look at water, especially versus wine, which was the usual addition to the sacrifices, wine represents, especially in Kabbalistic thought, wine represents intellect, intelligence, which really is funny because usually when you drink too much wine, you end up with a lack of intelligence and intellect. But leave it as it may, wine represents maturity and intellect and really tapping into your innermost thoughts and your real ability to think. Water, on the other hand, it represents simplicity. not so much with the intellect and the smartness. Simplicity, really. And the representation of the water, what water is representing for us really, is the concept of going back to creation, going back to the core, going back to the point, which was when God created the world and he separated the waters from the lower waters to the higher waters, because in the beginning it was just water everywhere, and then God separated lower and higher. That was the core of creation. And as well, water is very involved in any kind of creation. Most things needing to grow require water in order to get them growing. Obviously, they have some other things necessary. Some plants have the photosynthesis, and other things grow from moonlight and all kinds of things. They obviously need the earth and minerals to grow. But water is a very, very important substance and for sustaining life and growth. So water really represents the core basic, the beginning, the core of everything, the beginning, the simple start to where things are. And that's a very important thing to remember, is that sometimes we get all caught up in our own thoughts and our own calculations and figuring out how things should work. And sometimes you have to take a step back and understand that, remember, God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. God created the world. God has a plan. Everything is going according to God's plan. Sure, we have a job to do and we have responsibilities, but at the end of the day, we're not going to change God's plan much. We're not going to change it in a major way. We are adding to it, if anything, and therefore we shouldn't be too caught up in the calculations on how everything's going to work out. Things will work out. And that is a very important thing to, at least from time to time, to let go of our calculations and just let things be for a little while. It really taps us back into our original self, back to the way we were in the beginning. And that gives us a really very powerful concept. And that really allows for true joy. Once you let go of the control to say that I have to be on top of everything and everything is under and take away that pressure, and you say God is in charge, that allows true joy. And that's what the Talmud is really telling us. Not really seeing, in the translation of the words in the Talmud, of seeing really could also be translated as experience. Anyone who has not experienced the water libation ceremony has not experienced true joy. Because if you haven't experienced taking yourself a step back and reconnecting to the water, to the core, to the basis, and saying God has created everything and we just have to put it back into God's control, you cannot and will not really appreciate true joy. We do have the ability today to do it. We do have the ability today to step back and say, leave it up to God. I'd like to wish you all a happy Sukkot. Please like our video, and please comment in the comment section for any questions you have on this video or any other videos, and share the video with your friends and family so everybody can enjoy the weekly Torah Power-Up. Have a happy Sukkot and a Shana Tova. See you next week.